What does modern day colonialism look like? Well, let's all understand with an example. So, last year, in the early part of the year, a copper mine in Zambia, which is a sub-Saharan African country, unleashed 50 trillion liters of toxic chemical acid into the Kefu River. Kefu River provides water for about 60% of that country. Incredibly important. Incredibly ecologically devastating. Dead fish washing up on the shore throughout the country. Already that country is experiencing a severe drought, and also they must divert a lot of water to hydropower. That's how they get most of the power, so water is incredibly important. Now, the company that did this, Sino Metals, is owned in large part by the Chinese government. Zambia also owes China billions of dollars. In fact, 25% of all foreign debt of Zambia is owed to China. An amount equivalent to 13% of their gross domestic product. That's if you added all of the economic value generated by every single little transaction, every single act, every single resource in the country in a year. An amount equivalent to 13% of that owned by China and 25% of all their foreign debt. That's a huge leverage imbalance. How can you adequately protect your people when you are reliant on another country to renegotiate debt? Because Zambia defaulted on the debt in 2020, had to bring China to the negotiating table. China's invested tons in different developing countries through their Belt and Road Initiative, over $1 trillion in the last decade, and 130 different developing nations, and they've wielded that sometimes as a stick to get things to happen. Colonialism was all about the extraction of resources by, more powerful powers from others. And so all these investments, where does this copper go? Well, it goes to China. Well, it's benefiting China, going out of this country to another. They're very reliant on this industry. And so that's why, the government response to this terrible ecological disaster in Zambia was very muted. And then just a few months later, another one happened. That only resulted in, any kind of government action when a man literally died and fell into acid. Tons of rural communities suing for the damage caused by these different copper mines, but nothing really happens. Those cases remain unresolved because there's a power imbalance. And this is not just a dunk on China. This happens all the time. France controls basically the economies of over a dozen African nations because their currencies are pegged to French-controlled economic systems. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, in the 90s, used debt to get different Latin American countries and African countries to adopt policies, economic liberalization policies that they wanted them to. So they're like, we'll give you this money that you desperately need because you're struggling, but you got to do what we want to say. These power imbalances, these power dynamics are modern day colonialism. And the West does it. Major powers like China do it. Who is largely at the brunt of it? Well, the average person in a resource-heavy country. Think about these concepts like colonialism. You're like, oh, well, that was in the past. Now, the effects. No. Still. Things are still happening. Just because it's not overt and, in your face doesn't mean that there are not power imbalances happening that affect countries in different stages of economic development at their expense. When we're taking resources from one place for another, and that place that you're taking them from kind of gets shafted, that feels like colonialism to me.